Cyberpunk Uncensored.
Hello, Chumbas. This is Cybersmily with my co-host.
Greetings, programs. This is Wisdom000.
And welcome to Tales from the Forlorn Dopes. Tonight, as you can see by the graphic, we are going to be doing a review, thoughts, analysis, and other fun things about Cyberpunk Red and our take on it. So both of us have been making notes, gathering our notes, and we're about to share what we think about this wonderful new game from Artel Saurian. Wisdom, you want me to start off, or?
Yeah, go ahead and...
So, my strategy is just
go ahead and kick us off there, pal.
Sure. My strategy is just to go over kind of the main areas of Cyberpunk Red versus Cyberpunk 2. So the first point that I started with was stats. And with stats, the difference, of course, being they dumped the attractiveness stats and they added in Dex and Will. The things I saw that were good about Red and what they did was they reduced a little of the derived stats, getting rid of the BTM, and they didn't really give the damage bonus, because damage bonus was kind of converted into dice damage based upon your body. The other thing I liked about the stats was the removal of the secondary skill, reliance on intelligence and reflex, because too many players I've had in the past was they would just max out both of those stats and become unrealistic. And the other thing I liked was the limiting of stats to 8. So that way you didn't really have god characters to start off. The things I didn't like with stats was basically the charts. How's it going, Shinobi? And do not tray recurse. Oh, don't trace Corvée. How you all doing? So the things I didn't like were the charts. I think the charts for the different systems of generation of characters, right? Which I think was the Street Rat. I think was the basic.
Yeah.
Having a chart there makes sense, right? Because it kind of gears a new player to, hey, you don't have to worry about stats. Here are the stats that we think you would benefit from. In the advanced character creation, I think those charts really probably should have been gotten rid of, in my opinion. The other thing that I didn't like around the stats, and it was derived stats with the hit points. When you're comparing it, you had to compare your willpower or your will versus your body and look it up on a chart to figure out how many hit points you had. If they really wanted to streamline it, they would have just made it a straight body times 10, right? Or body plus wisdom times 5. Or body times, sorry, not wisdom. body plus will times 5, you know? Which, and then the last thing to me, if they really wanted to streamline stats, they wouldn't have added Dex and Will. They would have dumped attractiveness, and in my opinion, they should have dumped Move as well, because I don't see Move as a crucial skill or a crucial stat.
I can't agree with that. I like a movement stat. It could have been derived a little bit, like it could have been a derived skill from a combination of reflex and body. That might have alleviated some of that, since there are no skills that are based off of movement allowance.
Yep.
But I like the stat itself. I liked the attractiveness stat. Sure, you could get surgery to change it up or down, but I mean, it was a stat, and it definitely reflected on how people like dealt with you on a day-to-day basis. We live in a shallow society in Cyberpunk well, in any Cyberpunk, really. It's pretty shallow.
Yeah.
Style over substance and all that.
Well, I think
you'll
the
have
reason
to
they got
forgive
rid
me.
of the
The notes I took, I started at the start of the book, and I'm like having to move around to get up to speed on the. My brain is not working at the moment. To the stats. Right. I started like at page 1 and moved forward. So.
Yeah, I'm not going to get
the stat packages. Go ahead.
I wasn't going to get too much into like the fluff sections of Cyberpunk Red, because I think it's a different animal when you're comparing it to 2020, you know. But for me, the stats, especially with attractiveness, that was always a dump stat for a lot of people. At least in my group, it was luck and attractiveness that people would just like. Yep, if I gave them points as opposed to rolling stats, they would specifically, you know, have a 1 or 2 in those stats.
The luck problem by when you determine your character points and whatnot, you don't include luck in that. You wait till you're all done with picking your stats and whatnot, and then you roll luck separately in front of the GM. So there was no using luck as a dump stat.
Right.
Instead, it was the one stat that always relied purely on luck. Attractiveness. If you want to dump if you want to make attractiveness a dump stat, well, I mean that's the more power to you. If you want to go through the game looking like Quasimodo, that's your bag, baby. I could never do that to myself. Yeah, no, I gotta. I grew up on James Bond and stuff. My character's got to be somewhat handsome. Plus, I'm a chud in real life, so I don't want my. There's a reason I don't show up on video in any of this stuff. So when I play a game, I want my characters to at least, you know, have a chance with the ladies.
Yeah. You got any other comments like around the hit points?
But
or
as
other parts of the stat system.
The stat packages, the only one that works is the complete method. That's the only one that allows you to stat your character as you see fit. I am not a fan of limiting the stats to 8. I'm just not. If you want to be like the high reflexes action hero, I think that's a viable role-playing choice. I'm not really sure where the philosophy of like your character has to be a schmuck and a schlub come from. I mean, I guess Rick Deckard is where it comes from, because he just got his ass thoroughly kicked all up one side and down the other in Blade Runner. Like, that's why you know he's not a replicant, by the way, is because if he was a replicant, he wouldn't have been such a miserable failure at fighting anything. Like, everybody kicked his ass. Right. But yeah, I mean, some people want to play, you know, the schmuck. The guy who, you know, even with the schmuck though, like they get by, they have some like really high stat. For most of the schmuck characters, they're really clever, and that's how they get by. They may not be super smart, but they've got high cool, or they've got, you know, wisdom. That's not really a... Yeah, they can get by with something. Something makes them better. With most action heroes, it's always going to be reflexes. Even if they're not like... I mean, even if they're complete schmucks like Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China, like, that dude catches a knife in midair. Like, that dude's got super high reflexes. He talks about it. It's all in the reflexes, baby. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with people giving themselves high stats. It balances itself out in the wash. I want to play action heroes. I mean, nobody's going to try and make Mad Max the character with, like, a 7 reflex. No, that dude is super fast. Beating snakes and stuff.
Yep.
Anyway. The complete method is really the only one that works. I'm not really sure what the other ones are about, and I'm with you. I don't know why we need like 12 pages full of tables on everything. I don't know why each. Yeah. The other methods don't really work for me personally.
I have an inkling. The times I've played with Mike at cons. He seemed he seemed to like tables and rolling on tables, so I can see it as a personal preference.
I can imagine.
What do you think about the hit point system?
The idea of them is solid.
Yeah.
I think if they were implemented without, there's a lot of tables in this book. Just a lot of tables, and some of them are repetitive, like. Entire sections repeat, and it's kind of odd.
Yeah. What do you think about the hit point system versus like the wound system from 2020?
Oh, all right. I am trying to be. I'm trying to be as upbeat and positive with this, but I will say this: I despise hit points. I don't like them in any game, and. The reason Cyberpunk 2020 and Interlock was my favorite game of all time is because one of the main reasons is because it didn't use hit points. I get what they're going for. I get that they are trying to make the game more accessible to a broader amount of people. They're trying to... I also think on some level, they're trying to make the game feel like they're trying to make the tabletop game and the video game feel a little bit more like each other. But no, I don't like hit points. I really don't.
Well, I see the reasoning, right? They wanted to make the characters your character a little more survivable, right? Versus the flat hit points you got from 2020, right? And just how quick.
I thought the same thing. But that really seems like contradictory because everything else they do, like limiting the stats to 8, like everything else they do just kind of seems to push that mortality, and then they'll do stuff in the rules that, let the character stay alive. It's really... I had a hard time figuring out what they were trying to go for completely with this.
Well, the one good thing about their hit point system is it's not level based. They still keep it as kind of a flat hit point system no matter how long the campaign lasts, which to me still reflects, yes, no matter how really powerful or how long you've existed, the reason why you survived is because of your wits, not because you went up a level, which I prefer.
I get that, and that's always been the beauty of Cyberpunk. It just, I'm there. The hit points are going to be a sore spot for me from the get-go.
Yep.
Pardon me.
No problem. So let's move on to rolls.
There's a fan blowing, and it's throwing dust all over everything.
So the rolls.
You say rolls?
Yes. So they haven't really changed the base roles, which was nice. To me, there was a lot of goodness that came out of this system around roles, specifically the better expanded rules on special abilities. I liked that they actually defined some of these special abilities and what you can do with them. I thought was good.
Amen to that.
The other thing I liked was there was no set skill list for the roles. So, and I know that was a constant gripe with the community for years.
Oh yeah, I just threw out the whole concept personally when I ran.
So that's one of the great things about this game. The removal of the cash reliance on special abilities, and the limitation
to an
of
extent.
that special ability. Yeah, to an extent, true.
Yeah.
It's geared more towards your income as opposed to starting cash.
Well, I like what they did. I like that they codified all the special abilities. They give you complete breakdowns on how the special abilities all work, and I think that's beautiful. They for most of them they went with like the same thing I did with Interlock Unlimited, where your special ability just adds to other skills, which it's how it worked with Combat Sense, and Combat Sense was the only one from the original from 2020 that nobody ever had a question about how combat sense worked really, but like a charismatic leadership, like that was such a nobody, like no two GMs ever really agreed on how charismatic leadership actually worked in any given situation. Like GMs wouldn't even agree with themselves on a day-to-day basis on.
Yep.
So they fixed a lot of that. There's no more abstraction to the roles, which is good. Like, rules should not be abstract. At least not when it comes to defining your character and what your character can do.
Yeah.
I've always been a proponent of roles. I like them. I will say that as much as I like what they've done with the new roles, Lawmen and Corpse still seem to have their special abilities affected by employment. And that's kind of problematic. Just in the sense of like your employment is such a tenuous thing, especially if you're an edge runner where, doing jobs day to day puts your whole livelihood at risk.
Yep.
But I get it. I get what they're going for. I don't really complain. It's not really that big of a problem. It just, it's led to some issues in the past, which is why with Interlock Unlimited, we really tried to eliminate that special ability based on employment situation.
Yeah, I mean,
I like the idea that nomads. Go ahead.
Well, for me, and it's probably going to be a little bit of the nomad thing. There was just minor gripes I had with some of the special abilities overall, right? Like, speaking of nomads, right? So their special ability, you get to add the ranks to any drive skill, right? Which is fine, right? Hey, they're supposed to be expert drivers, great. And then you go into something like the med tech, right? Who has his or her ranks, and they're supposed to split up their ranks into putting it into the other skills like surgery, pharmacy, and cryo, right? So even though I'm a med tech and I have a surgery skill now, I still only roll stat plus surgery, and I do not get an extra bonus. Whereas the nomad is super awesome at driving, even better than a surgeon at surgery. I think that consistency of okay, this special ability I'm going to add to a skill row, and this special ability, I'm going to create skills off of it. Because in the end, you know, a starting med tech, right? He's going to have an 8 surgery plus his stat of 8 is going to be a plus 16 to surgery. And for a nomad, you know, I'm going to have a driving of 6 plus my rank of 4 is 10 plus my reflex is another 8. So I'm at a plus 18 to the skill roll. And I think that goes up dramatically as their special ability continues to go up and their other skills go up. So to me, there should have been more of a consistency on how you apply your special ability to a skill roll than how it was done. I did like, and the other thing I didn't quite like was techs with their fabrication and their upgrades. And that, okay, you make a skill roll, right, to see if you succeed at it. Halfway through, if you don't succeed at it, you just lose the time. You would lose materials too. So to say that the thing is uninjured and you don't have to spend additional money, I think is a problem. Because you are going to waste materials to do whatever you're doing, especially if you're inventing something.
Sure, I mean, and it depends on how crunchy you want to get. But my problem with the nomads is, while I love the idea that they're tying driving into being a nomad, it's weird to me that they dropped the family aspect of it, even though that's still the name of the special ability. Like, it's not tied to your relationship with your nomad family anymore. Like, you're not, I don't know, to me, that was always important, was the social aspect of the family. In addition to the driving, it just being able to call on them to have them come help you. It's weird that it seems like they completely eliminate that.
Yep.
Going back to the stats really quick. What was I going to say? Humanity loss. I think while humanity loss should be derived from empathy, I don't think beyond that it should affect it. It should maybe provide bonuses and penalties, but I don't think like it should just cut your humanity or your empathy down. I get what they were going for, what they've always been going for with it, but lately I've been thinking about this, like, sociopaths are still good at manipulating people. Yeah. They're good at using empathy-based skills.
Yep.
Yeah, but they don't have any
empathy.
You would say that their humanity is pretty damn low.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a partial of, 2020, right? Because oftentimes you would have players with these humongous humanities wanting to cut themselves up as quick as possible.
Yeah.
To not become human anymore. Yeah.
Thanks, Capricious.
Anything about the roles you want to continue or talk about?
I think that I like, because it's tied into roles. I'm going to skip on forward a little bit to the life path.
Yep.
Every role gets its own separate life path page or 3. And I like that. It's a neat concept. It starts feeling a little bit redundant because there's so much overlap between the roles. And the variation between the roles for these life path tables it seems it's really varied and it's kind of unbalanced. Like some characters get like 2 pages of personal life path, others get like half a page. You look at it and you're like, well, that's
that was
that's
my
a
next
thing, I guess.
subject I was going to bring up was the life paths. I did like the adding of the roles. However, to your point, I think the point of certain role life paths, right? So some of them I start with a partner or in a band, so I have all these other additional contacts that other characters aren't going to have, which to me, you kind of got it through life events from 2020, right? Additional people,
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for anything that expands life path. I love life path, but it just...
Yeah, I think there's definitely some tweaking that needs to be done around it.
Like, it's definitely a positive.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I very much liked about Red, but it's just kind of unbalanced.
Yep. I also liked that you just instead of rolling life events and randomly possibly getting a friend, possibly getting an enemy, I like the flat roll. However, I don't like that you roll a d10 minus 7, because that leads only a 30% chance you're going to get a friend or an enemy, right? I think it should have been something closer to like a d6 minus 3. So that way you have a 50% chance of gaining one or more friends and gaining one or more enemies. And just tweak those just a little. The other thing I didn't like about the life path was
just make small adjustments.
Yeah. Just flat out getting rid of the big wins and big losses. Now, I know some of them can be viewed as imbalancing a character at the beginning of creation, right? But there's ways of balancing it out. Good.
Was it really that imbalancing, though? I mean, as long as nobody was cheating on it, which is why, in my opinion, the GM should always take a very hands-on approach to character creation, especially life path. Let them choose all their like personality traits and the color of their hair. By all means, let them choose that, but don't let them choose life path. You roll that. That's part of the fun for both characters or both people. Player and GM.
Yeah, and to me, the big wins and big losses, there's just referee gold in both.
Yeah, absolutely, it's referee gold. I get that some of the losses are harsh, like starting your character just immediately right off the bat losing a stat point. That's harsh. That's not cool.
Or one getting a -5 on your attractiveness.
Yeah, but I mean, if he gets an extra $1,000 at character creation, which is like I think the absolute max you can get from any big win, that's not really that big of a deal. If somebody has a little bit more money than the others, that's life, baby. That's just the way that goes.
Yep. Yeah, so that's that and the happy love affairs, right? You have the tragic love affairs now, but it's also good to always have
I like the happy love affairs. I like setting up
or
I mean, that's just more shit for the G. That's more kindling for the GM fire. That's.
Yep. Anything else on the life paths?
That's all I got on life paths. Overall, I like what they did, but it was like you said. There's the big wins and big losses is sorely missed, as is the happy love affairs and what.
Yep. So let's move on to skills. The things I liked about the skills was the reduction of some of the skills that were on the character sheet but really never really used. I liked that, and that they consolidated it into basically, hey, you're an expert The whole getting rid of or better understanding of what hide evade versus stealth was. I also like that some of these skills had a default level, right? You started off with like a perception of 2, first aid of 2, and skills you just start at a minimum level. I thought was good because everyone starts off with some skills. What else? The capping of the starting levels I liked.
I like that a lot. I've been using that personally for decades now.
Because to me, you know, characters really need some type of growth, and raising raising skills is one of the rewards that you get with this game, right? So to me,
I mean, unless you're playing hardened, like professional, like soldiers or like super spies or something like that, your characters aren't going to start out as the best there is. Like, where's the fun in that?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been in my games for a long time now. I limit it to starting skills 5. I think in Red it's 6.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I wholeheartedly support that 100%. I'm the jury's still out for me on the pared down skill list. The simplicity is nice. I personally prefer a larger list. We'll get into it later because skills are really covered in 2 different sections of the book. Yeah, I prefer a larger list. That's me. But again, I appreciate the simplicity. So yeah, I'm on the fence about that.
Yeah,
I do like the free language skill at 4. Again, with Interlock Unlimited and my personal games, I've been doing that for as long as I'm putting skill caps on starting skills. Free language. I had it at like 6. 4 works. 4 actually was probably much better. I think I'll personally change that in my games to reflect.
Well, you did get a free language in 2020. You spoke the language you rolled up for your ethnicity, and you also got street speak.
Yeah, everybody got street speak for free. Did you actually get like a number for the language you rolled?
8.
8. Okay. Well,
I know.
You play a game long enough, you forget.
So speaking, and I know that you have 2 sections of the skills, right? Which was the actual resolution of skills. The one thing I thought was
capricious.
Yep.
Sorry.
Skills.
Capricious brings up a good point on academic education, because playing a character that doesn't know how to read, write, or do basic math is not really that much fun in a cyberpunk world. So everybody gets some level of academic education, your education, general knowledge. I don't know that it should be free. I think you should have to spend points on it. But yeah, it's definitely something that if you don't take, you really screw yourself over in the end. Like, immediately, it becomes apparent, like, you can't read or write.
Yeah, but it wasn't in
Sorry,
2020.
I didn't mean to go off the rails there.
No problem. With a education of 2, it was like considered a grade school education,
Yeah,
and like 4
like
is a high
3
school.
high school graduate, 3, 4. Yeah, and then you start getting into college levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a whole lot of points to invest into something just to make sure you have, like, basic high school education.
Yeah. And what do you think of the new crit success, critical failure for skills?
Man. Again, I'm on the fence. With the way they've set up the game, it works really well for what they've set the game up to be. Yeah, it works really well for what they've set the game up to be. That's what I can say about it.
Well, I thought it was an interesting take that a 1, you just roll another d10 and you minus it off. Which is a different way of looking at it, right? Because I think one of the gripes I've heard is everyone, no matter what, has a 10% chance of failure. Whereas the critical failure kind of doesn't really say you fail automatically if you roll a 1. It's just if you roll below your skill or the DV, then you fail. Which is nice to look at. Or nice to have.
I'm again gonna parallel this with Interlock Unlimited because we kind of approached it from the same angle. They used a critical success and fumble chart to expanded how that works. Whereas with Interlock Unlimited, you roll a second D10 and you roll under your skill. If you roll under your skill, it's not actually a fumble; you just get a 1.
Right.
So it turns it into, like, the higher your skill level, the less chance you have of actually fumbling. Because if you've only got a 1, you're going to fail a lot. Some of those failures are going to be catastrophic. But the more skilled you get, the less likely you are to fail. And failing 1 out of every 100 times, that's not quite so bad.
Yeah.
It keeps the fun of fumbles in and critical successes without, like, every other roll is, oh, I shot my friend in the face again. Oh. So I like that they kind of went that direction with their critical tables to where, you know, a 1 isn't automatically just horrible and a 10 isn't automatically amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
All right, so next topic. What do you want to get into? Combat or gear / weapon / armor / the economy?
Yeah, we can. I mean, weapons. After skills, weapons are the next thing they talk about in the book. So that's. Again, it's brief. Like they cover the weapons and gear and all that in 2 separate places. But for me, I don't care for the oversimplistic weapons. I understand that they're trying to get rid of the gear porn, but the thing is, some of us really liked our gear porn. Some of us, that was a big draw for the whole game, was like the Chromebooks and like poring over the weapons, trying to, you know, find the weapon that fit your character's personality or the piece of gear that really made them stand out and unique from the other characters of the same type you've played. Like it worked.
Yep.
And I get that simplicity is the trend. I do. But yeah, I like gear porn. Like anybody who's been to Datafortress2020 knows I like my gear porn.
Yeah, and for me, you know, so when you look at role-playing games, right, you look at the reward system. So, for example, you know, Dungeons & Dragons, the reward system is leveling, which brings higher stats, more skills, and gear, right? So without leveling, you need, you have other reward system. And Cyberpunk, to me, has always been a system of gear, right? Whether it's cyberware, weapons,
I mean, and that, honestly, every role-playing game is. Every role-playing game that I've ever enjoyed, like half the time when I'm not actually playing it, if I can crack open a gear book, if I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, and even though it's not the current system, if I crack open Aurora's Whole Realms catalog, or one of those thick spell volume things, the Tombs of Magic,
yep.
That is nothing but unlimited adventure ideas going on in my head, character concepts. Like, it's amazing to me just what one little picture or one blurb of something can set off as the chain of, like, mental images in my head.
Yep.
And gear porn's important for me when I'm gaming. That's just how I'm wired. If it weren't for staring at, when I was a kid, I got the Dungeons and Dragons book, the original red basic box set.
Yep.
I got that for Christmas one year, and I stared at I didn't understand the concept of the game, but I stared at the equipment pages and the weapon pages of that book until my eyes bled. Because they were providing me, even before I understood what a role-playing game was, they were providing me with ideas. When I got the Robotech books, I was such a huge fan of Robotech, and now I had, like, all the fighter jets, like, with stats next to them, and they kind of told me what they all did, and, like, their groovy laser guns and all that. I love that shit.
Yeah.
I think codifying it all down to this overly simplistic, yeah, I don't personally like it. It's not for me.
Yeah, it's not for me either. Like you, I prefer the gear porn. Because
armor is the same way in it. Go ahead.
It's
sorry.
To me, you're also tapping. Yeah, no worries. You're tapping into human nature, right? When you're playing games. Now, I completely understand some people aren't into gear porn, right? And they're not into gear. They just want to deal with the story, and they want to keep things rolling, and that's fine and dandy, right? It's to me, and when you're doing basic rules, it's easier to take away than it is to add back, right?
Yeah, especially when you're trying to keep things simple. I get what they're going for.
And I get it, right? So, and there's other ways they could have simplified things, right? With that whole system of, okay, you know what? Let's get rid of weapon accuracy. Let's get rid of reliability. They could have taken a little bit away from 2020, right? By eliminating these two arbitrary parts of a weapon, but they could still have, okay, maybe there is some, and again, when they probably started doing that, they saw, well, a 9mm is a 9mm, and it's always going to do this damage. If you take away the weapon accuracy, that's the reliability, it's pretty much the same weapon no matter what. But to me, that's where the flavor comes in, right? And the picking and the choosing,
exactly,
and building your own type of weapon, or like you said, hey, my guy's gonna be a 6-shooter guy. He's always gonna have a revolver, or like I've always had characters who prefer like a Volt pistol. Love the Volt pistol, but only for certain characters. Other characters I like to have other type of weapons. and by limiting it out and just really simplifying it so much, it kind of, I don't know, ruins a little bit of the fun that some games give me, in particular this game.
What I'm really hoping for is they've already announced a Chromebook, and I don't know how a Chromebook would actually work with this unless, and this is just me hoping and being optimistic, unless that they're planning to expand things like guns and armor in the Chromebook, which is always a possibility. I mean, they've kind of done things in the past of a similar nature. They expanded martial arts with Pac Rim in 2020.
So if anyone from RTG is listening, our vote is more gear porn.
More gear porn. Give us back our guns, our individual guns. As I was gonna say, armor. Again, it's too simplified. It basically just it. Again, I get what they're going for. They're trying to keep everything simple. But now armor just basically gives a generic armor class like Dungeons and Dragons, where one piece of armor protects everything.
And it's not just Dungeons and Dragons. I've seen it in like Shadowrun and a bunch of other games, right? And
yeah, it's everything.
But to me,
it's standard role-playing practice.
Yeah. So armor, I thought was good. The good part of it, right? They reduced a little of it. Yeah, I did. They reduced the numbers a little, so that way you didn't really get into God mode. Getting rid of the layering, smart move, right? It makes the game a little more, and yes, it makes it simplistic, but it's simplistic in a good way, right? So to me, when we talk about simplistic, it's not always a bad thing. There is some good that simplicity does, which to me, 5e, yes, they changed some things, but their simplicity also benefited. Granted, you can argue that it didn't really benefit in some areas, but it did in others. And to me,
I mean, for me, the way they handle armor is just indicative of the real problem where they got rid of hit locations. I'm definitely not a fan of that.
I'm borderline. I could take hit locations or I can leave hit locations. For red being what it is, fine. You guys don't want to do hit locations, great. That speeds up combat in a way, right? Because if you think about how you have to run combat is, okay, I shoot, I roll the hit. If I hit, I gotta determine what location I hit. Okay, I determine the location. Now I roll damage. Okay, how much armor do you have there? All right, so I reduce that from my roll. Did any of it get through? Oh, it did. Now I need to take my BTM off of that. Okay, did I even score 1 point of damage? Okay, I did. Now you're at, if you're not in mortals, okay, now make a stun save. Did you make the stun save? And if you are in mortals, you got to make a stun save and you got to make a death save. So,
my rebuttal to that is that only matters for PCs. If the GM is going through all that effort on every one of the NPCs, the GM is really wasting his time. Like, the beauty of being a GM is we can just hand wave that stuff. Oh, you did this much damage, dude's dead.
Right.
Or you got through his armor or you didn't. We can decide that on the fly. And, certain enemies who are important, we can pay a little bit closer attention to the rules, but, sometimes the GM's just got to play a little fast and loose.
Agreed.
But I understand that overly simple systems is the trend. It's been the trend since Savage Worlds hit the streets. I get it. I understand that's what's hip and popular. It just doesn't appeal to me. And I think in this case, it dulls the edge that Cyberpunk had. Cyberpunk's hit locations, they're beautiful to me. In 2020, with this, I understand that like critical tables kind of make up for the loss, but to me, they don't do the same. They don't have the same feeling.
Yeah, well, I'm going to disagree and say that, it does speed up combat, especially when you get into auto fire, right? Speaking of which is another subject, right? So for me,
we'll get to that one in a bit.
auto fire in 2020 is just horrendous, right? If you don't have a calculator or a app to help you with that. One of the reasons why I built some of my site was because of the complexity that auto fire can have. But I don't see that as a problem of the game mechanics. And yes, I am also part of that generation who basically, we learned crunch. All the games that we grew up with were crunch, right? And you want to talk about tables, think about, like, I don't know if you ever played Rollmaster or Iron Crown's, any of Iron Crown games.
Oh yeah, Rollmasters.
Think of the charts there.
Anything from Ice, anything from anything from Mayfair.
Yeah. So we grew up on crunch, and that's something that we learned from a game. But I also, and again, I don't see the simplistic nature that a lot of games are going for. I don't see that as a bad thing, and I don't see it as taking away from the gaming experience. Because again,
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's not for me.
Right. And I see it as it's useful depending upon the game, right? If Cyberpunk, I need to play fast and loose with combat because I want to get more into story, I'm going to probably use Red a lot more to do that. Because, yes, it
for me, it comes down to
realism with 2020. But again, it's all based upon how I'm doing my story and how quick I want to get combat over.
For me, it's like, this is my perspective. You can play as fast and loose as a GM with the rules you want. That is your purview as GM. The game promotes that. I've never seen a game that doesn't. But here's the deal. It's better to have a rule and not use it than not to have a rule in situations where having a rule really helps things out a lot.
Right.
You can always choose in Cyberpunk 2020. You can always choose not to use a hit table. Just hand wave that stuff out of the way. Like, oh, you hit, and you did with an assault rifle, 6d6 damage. That dude is dead. He's not wearing any armor. There's no need to roll on a hit table. You can just hand wave that out of the way. But man, it sure is nice to have that option. It sure is nice to be able to, like, say I want to shoot the dude's hand and knock the gun out of it. Well, sure, it's a ridiculously hard shot, but you can do that. There are rules to help you. Whereas that's missing in Red.
Mm-hmm.
And again, simplicity is the trend. That's what everybody wants these days. It's just not for me.
Right. Well, one of the things I did
Interlock to me is such a beloved system, and Cyberpunk 2020, I mean, I've spent 30 years making it into like the perfect system for me, and it's hard to let that go.
Right. Yeah, and I think you've donated quite a lot of time in tweaking 2020 to be just right, and I understand it. And that's the other thing, right, and I'm in the same boat, right, with right now I'm running Cyberpunk 2020 because I know the rules, I know them very well. But I think for the next generation or new players coming into Cyberpunk, I've seen a lot of questions around that from people. What should I start with? Should I go into 2020? Should I go into Red? I think depending upon your gaming maturity, right? And when I say gaming maturity, I mean how long have you been playing role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games? well, to decide which one you really should go into.
Sure.
But
I mean, for today's generation, red is what they should go with. Red is what's going to make more sense to them. It's going to feel more similar to other games they might have played because everything's moving on this trend towards simplicity.
So, speaking of like,
and again, for gaming as a whole, it's a good thing. Go ahead.
And getting back into the whole combat system, the one thing I did like what they did with the combat system was actually specify what you can do in a round. With the old system, for whatever reason, people really got confused over the multi-action. I've seen people complain that, in the old system, what you could do is, for one action, you unload you shoot your pistol, the firing rate, you move, you can shoot your pistol, the firing rate again at a -3, and you can basically unload your pistol in one turn. And I don't think people actually read some of these rules.
Yeah, I was going to say that is not an accurate description of what you can do with the multiple action. It's an accurate description of what people tried to do.
Right.
But that's not exactly how it works. You're never going to exceed the rate of fire. Like if you're shooting full auto, you're just going to shoot with the full. That's what it does in 3 seconds. You're not going to extend time out and get that twice. Now, if you're doing single pulls, sure, multiple action comes in, -3.
Yep. But I think you already did that with your
and
your
in 3
system.
seconds, you can pull that trigger a lot of with combat actions in an interlock unlimited, it's based on your weapon skill, how many times you can pull the trigger. But a full auto weapon is still just going to do the full auto.
Yep.
Full auto rate of fire. That's never going to change.
And that's what I kind of liked with this system is that clarity that they have. You have a move action and you have another action. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, they have completely eliminated multiple actions, which, for simplicity's sake, is a positive. For what they're going for with the game, it works. Like, there's no need for multiple actions.
Yep. And I like that. And the critical injuries I do like, because it does give that, still gives you a little bit of that lethality. That's, I think that, like what you were saying, is okay, you remove your to hit location and all this other crunch, but you still have critical injuries, which still added to combat and the lethality to me. The one thing I really don't like about combat is that if you don't have line of sight to your opponent, that means your opponent, or sorry, if you have line of sight to your opponent, you're out of cover. If you're in cover, you do not get line of sight. I hate that.
Basically, if you throw a towel over your head, you're out of combat, baby. They don't see you either.
As opposed to, okay,
actually, no. You have to have complete cover, 100% cover, or you have no cover at all.
Right.
Which is just... How does that work? You're telling me I can't hide around the corner and just pop my arm and head around enough to get a shot?
Yep.
And not get any benefit from that? If I'm out of cover, I'm out of cover. That's... Yeah, I read that. I read that page, and I had to read it several times. It was like, is that really what it's telling me?
Yep. And I think that's the worst thing about combat. Removing, having a weapon in both hands and being able to shoot both weapons at their full rate of fire. Okay, fine. I get it. I don't like it, but
it's
I get
cyberpunk.
it. Yeah.
And it's action. You should be able to guns akimbo stuff without...
Yeah, especially like a Woo movie,
Yeah.
You get the doves flying behind you and you pull out your two pistols.
One of the most fun cyberpunk movies of all time is Nemesis, where the dude spends the whole movie going guns akimbo.
God, I love
basically
that movie.
the first Western John Woo style movie out there.
Yeah. Martial arts, I liked what they were going with. Yeah, it's different than 2020. But I
feel
like
we're
the minute
jumping
movers.
ahead on some stuff.
Well, we're getting into combat, right? And I'm in the combat section. I have the book in front of me. So.
I mean, you're going straight into Friday Night Firefight.
Yeah. What did you want to? Did you want to talk about more around weapons and armor, or?
Well,
or did you want to go backtrack to like cyber?
Yeah, basically, like I said, my notes just go like page by page.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna talk about humanity loss for a second.
Okay, we'll go back there.
I was overjoyed when I read their current take on humanity, because it's the same way I felt about humanity loss. It was actually one of the very first homebrew rules I ever implemented. Was that if you lose your arm and get it replaced with cybernetics, or if you have like an organ that's failing and you get that replaced, like prosthetics should not cost humanity loss. Nobody ever went crazy because they got a pacemaker.
Yeah.
No dude ever like hated life because he had a stump and now has a prosthetic arm. I got a light tattoo. Damn, I still have a prosthetic arm.
I got a light tattoo and I want to start killing people.
So I love that. I love that Art Talsorian finally agreed with me on that. On what should and should not provoke humanity loss. Basically, their idea, they went with me almost complete agreement. That unless the cybernetics you're getting, unless it replaces a perfectly good meat part, or unless it changes your functionality as a human, it shouldn't cost humanity loss. Now, if it does do that, if you like give yourself a tail, yeah, buddy, you're chipping away at your humanity there because you're no longer the same as everybody else. You now have something different and extra. If you give yourself cyber weapons or make your skin bulletproof, yeah, full humanity loss there.
So you want to start getting into the cyberware?
I mean, there's not really a whole lot other than that I have to get into at this stage, other than I'm curious as to why Anti-Dazzle requires 2 paired cyber eyes. Like, why couldn't why could you just get Anti-Dazzle in one eye? I mean, pirates did that. That's what the whole eye patch thing was. Outside, you'd wear an eye patch over one eye, and then you go into the dark and you switch it over so you retain your night vision.
Right. Yeah. And that's one of the things I didn't like about some of the cyberware was the limiting of slots. And yeah, to your point, the pairing is also like I think the other thing is low light UV that you have to pair, and it costs 2 slots to use.
Yeah,
which I didn't care for, and also the limitations of taking. So now you only have 3 slots in each eye. I mean, which to me, you only get so many slots, and with 2020, you could like one eye stuff. Like, okay, well, I got teleoptics in one eye, and the other eye I got image enhancement, or not image. Image enhancement works fine. You can tailor much better than you can in red, and it doesn't. The changes they've made in this didn't really make a lot of sense to me as to why. Yeah. I did like that they did do slots in certain areas, and that certain things do take up slots. However, things like, to me, skin weave requires a slot. it's your skin. You know, to me, a slot is...
Yeah. Why does... I understand if they're trying
location.
to balance things out, I guess, but yeah, skin weave should never require a slot. Just like skin weave should never be an armor layer. It's your skin.
Yeah, so I had like those type of gripes. And I think also, you know, with the amount of Chromebooks that they did have, I think they could have put in some more Chrome. Because it seemed like most of it was from the basic book.
I mean, they've announced a Chromebook, so I'm hoping they're gonna expand on it. With the way they've simplified everything, they kind of have to. Like, that's just, I mean, it's Chrome. It's going to be cybernetics. That's like the backbone of the Chromebook. That's why they're called Chromebooks.
Yep.
But yeah, it definitely needs to be more.
I also like the therapy rules and including those in the basic book and actually quantifying them as opposed to 2020.
Yeah. I mean, 2020 quantified them, but it was all in like secondary books.
Yep.
With how it actually worked, and even then, it's kind of hunt and peck trying to find the actual rules. So having it laid out in the main source book and codified, it works. It's good stuff.
All right. Anything else around the cyberware you want to talk about?
Just at this point in the book, the whole Street Rat Edge Runner complete thing it's starting to feel a little heavy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why that applies to cybernetics. I'm really not, but it's...
And again, I can see it for the Street Rat
starting to...
part, right? For a beginning basic character, you're just using basic rules, and a new player needs guidance.
Sure.
Completely understandable that you use this, but once you get off of the Street Rat, it should be.
Well, the fact that it's still like Street Rat for every single role, and then Edge Runner for every single role, and complete for every. Oh my God, it's starting to get cumbersome. I get why it's there. It's kind of awesome that it's there, but at the same time, man, I'm looking at so many charts and tables.
Yeah, and now that we're into we talked about weapons, we talked about cyberware, the economy. That is another thing that really, 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 really disappoints me in the simplistic way they approached it, with the different levels of expensive versus everyday and cheap and costly, and just putting all the prices in a grouping. By doing that,
I did not.
Go ahead.
I just saying I did not understand what they were going for with that one. Of all every other thing that they've done to make the game more simplistic, they throw the economy at us, and it gave me eye twitches.
And the other thing that really annoyed me is the inconsistency. So they use that level, that level economy for everything in the book except for net running programs. That's where some of the values are a little different. So to me, if you're using it, it should be applied everywhere. You shouldn't have small exceptions in these abstract areas.
Yeah.
The other problem with the whole economy is they limit things, right? So once you get to super luxury, okay, well, you can't really improve it anymore because it's super luxury. What's the next level there? Do you double the cost? Do you triple the cost? Is it times 5? Because even the levels of economy jump, right? They go from times 2 to times 5 to times 2 again. And even in Dungeons and Dragons, the 5th edition with their streamlining, they still had various prices for everything, and they still had the variety of what weapons you could use. Yes, a weapon still did D6, but you still called it an axe versus a longsword versus whatever, and you know.
I mean, it felt distinct and different.
So I think the economy is just, especially for a system like we've talked about, is gear porn. Which how do you get gear? Through money. If the money is, based off of this arbitrary
I agree
level
with that, Rob, by the way.
system, it's just so confusing. What do you write?
Yeah, he wrote that, or I guess no, November Alpha. The idea that traumatic events can cause humanity loss makes a lot of sense. I agree with that. It does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's humanity loss and post-traumatic stress. I mean, those should be tightly connected. I think skills come up next in the book, where it actually gets into like the definitions of skills and whatnot. And I the first thing that came to mind is, you can dodge bullets now?
If you have a reflex of 8 or better.
You can dodge bullets?
Kinda. I don't think you're doing a Nero. I think you're
I mean, are you sure? Because you're rolling your reflex against your attackers to dodge bullets.
Again, I don't think you're dodging.
I'm not really
bullets.
coming to any other conclusion but Neo.
You're dodging them aiming at you. I think I don't think if you're not noticing the person, you're not going to get. As a referee, I would not allow you to say, "Oh, you hear a gunshot. Well, I dodge it." No, you don't. You hear a gunshot, and I'm gonna roll the DV to try.
Right, but if you're standing there in front of somebody, if you're in a fast draw situation where you guys are facing off and that dude shoots at you, you can dodge the bullet. That's I mean, according to the rules, that's what that means.
And again, to me, picturing it in real life, I don't see it. Hey, I've shot my gun and all of a sudden you dodge. I think it's more or less, I pull out my gun, I aim at you, and you, as you're pulling the trigger, or I'm seeing you pull the trigger, I move and you can't keep up with my action of dodging out of the way of your aim, right? So you're not dodging you're dodging bullets, you're dodging aim of your opponent.
I mean,
if that makes sense.
I get that that's what it's trying to emulate, but I mean, yeah, it's still, attacker's stat plus skill plus D10 versus defender's stat plus skill plus D10. That's dodging bullets. Even if that's not how it's described, that's what's happening. And again, like you said, it's only for level people with like skills of 8 or higher.
Yeah.
But still, it's eye twitching. My eyes start twitching.
It was back in AD&D when you read the rules and it's like a round is a minute. Okay, how many attacks do I get? You get 1. Okay, so I swing. I wait 59 seconds.
Yeah, no, I hated that in D&D. I still
seconds.
hate that in D&D. I did that. Oh, that may be my single most hated rule about Dungeons and Dragons is how long is a round, and I can only do this one thing. Oh, well, yeah, but you're also like dodging and parrying, and no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm scrolling to hit and I swing. Don't abstract what I'm doing. Don't tell me what I'm doing. I'm telling you what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that I can hit somebody more than once a minute. That is, Jesus Christ. Oh, yeah. I get what they're doing, and I think for any melee actions, yeah, you should be able to like hand to hand. It should definitely be opposed skill rolls. I just don't think that should work with bullets and explosives and stuff.
Yep.
But again, simplicity, and that's what they're going for. So it works with the system. It's just, again, the eye twitch. Yeah. I love the new difficulty charts. I very much like those. I don't know why they come out and they seem better to me than the 2020 difficulty values. Maybe because like there's not a bunch of there's a very short negative modifier examples table, but for the most part, I don't know, the numbers work better for me.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I was looking at the numbers too, and they definitely work a little better, right? Because in the old system, you know, a 15 was average. So what you're saying is if I have an average stat, which according to the rules is 5, and I have an average skill, which really is around a 3, I have a 30% success rate of doing an average task.
Less than that. I mean, if you've got a 5 stat, or even a 6 stat, which is average in Cyberpunk, and a 3 in the skill, that's a 9. You've got to roll. Yeah, okay, you're right, 30%. Never mind. 30%. I'm an idiot.
So, yes,
yeah, it's
I liked how they rearranged those numbers. So, and it works especially with beginning characters, right? So, hey, I'm at a 6 and my stat is an 8, right? As a beginning character, that's a 14. So I'm always going to usually succeed at average unless I roll a 1 and then a higher number.
Yeah, I mean, if this is something I do every day, even at a low skill, like yeah, it works. I would have had every day be 12, but and I would have just lowered the numbers by everything by like 1 point, like straight across the board. But I get why they did what they did.
Yeah, and I like their
I really dig
well.
it. I also really like the idea of complementary skills on like page 130, where you can use skills in conjunction with each other. I like that. I like that idea. It's something I've always done, but there was no rules for it. I don't think even with Interlock Unlimited, I don't think I have any rules to support it. It's just something I've done. So seeing it on print, seeing it on the page is good. Yeah.
All right.
Now,
go ahead.
I'm gonna start. Go ahead.
No,
you go.
We're already 8:20, so I wasn't sure how long you wanted to continue talking. We're already been at it for about an hour and a half. I'm happy to continue talking. The only other subject I think I haven't talked about was net running.
I haven't even gotten halfway through my notes yet, so.
Well, you lead the conversation, and I will follow.
All right. Skills are where things I really start to. I get that they simplified everything and they pared down the skill list. What I want to know is what's the difference between conceal, reveal, and perception?
So conceal reveal is specifically for objects and hidden objects, right? So they're opposing skills. They're not opposing skill, they're the same skill, but they oppose themselves. Versus perception.
Right. It seems. Go Go ahead.
So to me, perception is noticing things out of the corner of your eye of other people's activities. Like when I look at Cyberpunk 2020, you know, you have hide evade versus stealth.
Except it's not. If you look at the skill list, it's the perception is the skill of spotting hidden things like clues, traps, and people using the stealth skill, but not objects hidden with the conceal reveal skill. How is spotting hidden things not spotting hidden objects? It's a redundant skill, and there's lots of them. How is trading different than persuasion? Like, if you're trying to talk somebody into stuff, how is it really a different skill to try and talk them into a lower price or a higher price? Why is evasion a separate skill from athletics or brawl melee martial arts?
Same reason why dodge was in 2020.
Yeah, it didn't make sense there either. That's why. Yeah. How is bribery in and of itself a skill? And what is the business skill? Like, how is bribery not different? How is bribery different than persuasion?
Right.
I like the deduction skill. As a new skill, it makes sense to me. It is something that's separate. Like, it's intuition, and there needed to be something like that there. How is acting, though? How is acting different than persuasion? Here's the big one for me. Why is paramedic a separate skill from first aid? I mean, a paramedic is just somebody who's taken first aid to a professional level. I don't understand why they're two separate skills.
Dying and treating most common critical injuries is first aid. Paramedic skill applies to medical treatment to a wounded person to keep them from dying, treating all critical injuries, not requiring surgery. Yeah. There's no difference.
Yeah. There's no difference. It's the same skill.
I don't have the wounds healing, but paramedic might increase the type of your healing possibilities.
I mean, I get that, but why wouldn't that just a higher level first aid? Why wouldn't that just cover that? Why are brawling and or martial arts treated as separate from melee? I don't understand that holdover. I've never understood that holdover. If I can kick your ass with my fists, I can pick up a baseball and kick your ass just as well. Or a baseball bat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but the knife is a different type of skill. Knife fighting is a different type of skill.
Really? Because every martial arts class I've ever seen that had weapons form taught it as that martial art. If you go and take a kung fu class, you'll learn how to use the weapons.
You will, and you will learn melee skill. Right? So Aikido,
yeah, but it's not separate. It's all treated as part of the same thing.
I can argue against that. Right? So melee is also sword fighting. Right?
Yeah, which is a martial art in and of itself.
Which is melee. Granted,
which is a martial art.
Yeah, well, in 2020 you had fencing, right? So
yeah, don't get me started on that. You had fencing and melee, which, I mean, yeah.
Well,
for me, the argument will always be that melee is just martial arts with a weapon.
And you could be trained in knife fighting and not learn martial arts. Well, technically everything
really?
You do with combat is a martial arts.
If you're trained in knife fighting, you're trained in how to throw a punch as well. I don't know of any martial art on the planet that teaches knife fighting that doesn't also teach, at least basic into hand skills. In fact, usually with the martial arts that are geared towards knife fighting, like Kali Eskrima and Pencak Silat, knife fighting and hand-to-hand are really one and the same.
Yeah.
Same with like Krav Maga. That's just the way, you know, martial arts and melee work. Right. If you want to learn how to use a sword, they're going to teach you how to fight too, because you're going to lose your sword at some point.
And again, so you're simplifying the skills. I can see a difference between melee versus martial arts, right? So martial arts to me is unarmed combat. Melee is you're fighting with a melee weapon, whether it's sticks, sword, spear, knife. To me, it is different on how you approach, right? So with knife, you want, when you're dealing with knife fighting, there's different tactics on how to defend yourselves when someone's confronting you with a knife, right? There's different tactics of how you're going to attack with a knife versus with, you know, an unarmed attack. So I can see it being a separate skill.
Where do you go to learn just knife fight?
I don't know. I'm not a combat mark, and I haven't really done a lot of research into it. But I do know,
I've
little exposure I have,
tremendous.
Knife fighting and weapon fighting is different than you know, than.
But it's really not. It's attacking and defending.
It's close, right?
It's hand to hand.
Same principles. Different technique.
They're taught at the same time. That's like Krav Maga. It teaches both unarmed and armed fighting, and it's all geared around that. You learn how to, if you're unarmed and someone comes at you with a weapon, it teaches you how to take their weapon and then stab the shit out of them. That is, like, it is all one thing. The same with Kali Eskrima, the same with Pencak Silat, the same Kung Fu. I mean, they teach you how to use the weapon as part of the martial art.
Right.
It's not a separate skill.
Okay, so someone who's never taken martial arts learns how to use a knife and learns how to fight with a knife. Never's taken any martial art class.
That's brawl. But they're not trained in it. They're just picking up a knife. That's exactly what brawling is.
All right, they pick up a sword.
Brawling is untrained hand-to-hand fighting. They're just doing it with a baseball bat or a knife. Now, if they go up against, if Joe Schmo, even though he may think he's really good at swinging that knife, if he goes up against a martial artist who is trained in a form that teaches him how to use a knife, he's going to lose every single time. Unless he gets lucky, and because there's always the roll of the dice. Either way, we're digressing a lot. This is a personal issue, and I can see we're not going to agree. Yeah. That we can have a whole long debate on martial arts and stuff. But why is dance not a performance skill? And that's the end of all that for me. There are a lot of skills that seem really redundant, and when they simplified the list, it just comes across as weird to me that so many of these skills overlap.
Right.
You'd think that if they were really trying to pare it all down, that there wouldn't be that. So again, it's just personal opinion. I don't know why there is this stuff, but I do like the new red version of multi-classing. I still prefer my Interlock Unlimited multi-classing, but for red, this is head and tails better than the Cyberpunk 2020 version of multi-classing. This is elegant and it works, and I like it quite a bit. Um, for all the simplification of the rest of the game, though, combat awareness seems really complicated to me. The ideas in it are good, but things like rolling with the punches being tied exclusively to the solo, and like having to figure out how to redistribute a solid
yeah. I think this
points,
is
picking and choosing it.
To me, it screams
It just looked kind of like
5th edition D&D.
Yeah, it's too much. I don't understand the thought process behind oversimplifying simplifying combat just to turn around and throw the complication of combat awareness out there. It just, yeah, maybe I'm just not smart enough. I don't know. I looked at it and again, I twitch.
Yeah, and from what I've
Hello?
seen, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, no, my mic did a weird twitchy thing. Yeah, it's good.
So one of the things with combat awareness, and a lot of referees kind of homebrewed, is that fumble recovery, right? So a lot of GMs and referees will homebrew that if you roll a 1, you can use either a luck point or 2 luck points after the fact to make that failure not a fumble. So
that's
you
is that not straight from the book?
No, it's not straight from the book.
Was like the number 1 use of luck in our games.
Exactly.
Like, all right, this roll is important. I'm using luck. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a homebrew rule, and that's a homebrew rule that's being carried over in Red. So one of the key solo abilities, or one of the things you can donate points into, GMs are just going to rule it out, from because they want right. They don't want just solos being able to avoid fumbles, but they also want everyone to be able to avoid fumbles or failures.
It's weird, like the homebrew rules that are like near universal between unrelated groups. Like everybody, I don't know. The luck rule for using a point of luck to avoid a fumble was so universal that I honestly thought that was in the rules. It's been a while since I've had to read that section, but yeah.
So what's the next
This is a tiny little thing, but there's a format switch on page 147 and 148 where it goes from single column to double column. I just noticed this, and it struck me as funny. I like the breakdown of what a techie can do. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and like I said, the thing.
I agree with you on the loss of materials.
Yeah.
But the fact that they break it down and give you rules for exactly what they can do with their special ability, it's good stuff. Clear groundwork for how the special abilities work is a good thing. I know we talked about it earlier. This is such an improvement. I like the guidelines for how they're used.
Yep. And again, Techie is also one of those special abilities that you roll the tech skill, whether it's basic tech, electronic, or whatever. You roll tech plus the ranking of your special ability. So there's special abilities that do that, and there's other special abilities that don't, which, I don't know, it's just, I'd rather see some consistency between them all.
It's weird to me that they broke up land vehicle from basic tech, because in 2020, basic tech is like small engine repair and like handyman work. like the things you would learn in shop class, basically.
Yep.
And then they had the specialized, like, you know, AV and helicopter and aircraft and like things like that. But yeah, in Red, they go ahead and break it up further, and like small engine is now separate from your basic tech.
Yep.
To an extent, like you still work on lawnmowers, but not cars.
Right.
I guess it's to round out the techie better. I guess.
And that's fine, right? So 2020, techies really never got any type of love from a splat book.
No, they didn't, and they really needed it. Both techies and med techies needed a splat book.
Yeah.
They're really the only character that didn't get any kind of love in that regard at all. Like most of the other roles, they got whole source books dedicated to them.
Oh.
Techies and medtechs got nothing.
Some would argue that the Chromebooks were techies. Splat books.
Except well, not really. I mean,
I know.
they're books full of tech, but they don't tell you how to make the tech or repair it or any of that. It's just, here's some stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, Rocker Boy got their own supplement. Solo's got it twice. Now the corps, they got kind of screwed with the corp books as far as how to run a corp. But really, running a corp and running a fixer, the only difference is, you know, where they live.
Yep.
I loved the breakdown of each role. The charts really start, yeah. I like that. Why is gear so very limited? Like the clothing. What was the purpose of the chart breaking things down so far and pricing it all out down to like jewelry and hats and glasses and glasses and mirror shades are separate things.
I didn't mind that because, you know, with Chromebook 4, you kind of had that. Granted, it is even more broken down, but
Well, I mean, they had examples for each. Yeah, I guess it looked weird to me in table form. I guess maybe that's just it. Maybe at that point I'd table overload.
Right.
I like that yards and meters are interchangeable. It makes sense. There's not at the ranges in Cyberpunk where combat takes place. There's not enough of a difference for it to matter.
Yep.
Plus, with yards, like meters is more accurate, but with yards you can break it down to feet, and sometimes that's important. I get that people who have been raised in the metric system break everything down into centimeters, but it doesn't work for me. I don't have any clue as to what, 52 centimeters actually. Never mind. I'm getting off. I'm going off on a tangent that I don't need to go off on.
It's an American thing.
The -8 for aim shots at specific locations. That's a hell of a modifier.
Well, you're aiming for the head, right? Usually.
Yeah, because really that's all you can aim at. You
Well, supposedly you
can't
can't
like
legs.
target an elbow anymore. Yeah, head and legs. Is it just me, or was there no chart for like combat-specific difficulty modifiers?
So there is a chart on page 173, but it breaks it down into weapons, right?
Yeah, it's just like weapon ranges. That's all it is.
With the difficulty numbers.
Speaking of that, Speaking of that, the sniper rifle difficulty values. It starts at 30 at 0 to 6 meters and then drops.
Yeah.
That's not how guns work.
No.
I mean, I kind of get what they were going for here, but that's not how guns work. Sure, if you're trying to look through the scope at something, then yeah,
in a computer
you're screwed.
game.
But at 6 meters, who's actually looking? Yeah, who's looking through the scope? You're just aiming down the barrel at that point.
Yep.
The rest of the table is fine. It's just the sniper rifles part really struck me as like, what's going on there?
Like a person isn't going to open their other eye.
Continuing with combat. Yeah. Continuing with combat, why does reloading a crossbow not require an action? I've reloaded a crossbow. That is not something you do quickly.
No, it is not. Well, I think they
why is
grouped it
auto
as a
fire
bow.
a skill? Sure, and bows, no, that I can see why a bow doesn't require an action to reload. But a crossbow and a bow are wildly different. Everybody thinks they're the same, but they're not.
No, they're not.
Like they don't shoot the same. They don't reload the same. Like they work on the same principle, but they are like shooting them is nothing like each other.
Yep.
Why is auto fire its own skill, and how does that work in relation to? Well, if I've got a submachine gun, I can shoot it either single fire or auto fire. So if I've got a weapon that's, I don't understand why auto fire is its own skill and how it's supposed to work in relation to the other weapons. I read it over and over and over again, and it still didn't make sense to me.
Again, I think auto fire is specifically for when you do auto fire versus shoulder mounted weapons or shoulder weapons in which you do single shot.
I mean, I guess, but I don't know. It just comes off as weird to me that it's a separate skill. Like, I'm sure it works in the game.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to actually play the game and use the auto fire rules. They seem kind of messy.
Right.
Again, and that's just how my brain works around it. I'm sure it works just fine in actual practice. We were talking about martial arts earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just me, or is the damage for martial arts in this in Red just insane?
That it scales based off of body?
Not that it scales off of body, but how much it scales. Like the actual amount of damage you do.
So if you're cyborged out, you can do 46 damage. Well, so if you're cyborged out, right, that means you probably have a bit of chrome on you. But yeah, so weaker people do, and I think
7 to 10, you're doing 3d6 damage.
Yeah, I think,
which is in the human range.
Which is in the human range, but if you think about it, it's a different wound system, right? So no longer are you scaled to really 12.
Okay,
hit points,
yeah, that makes
right?
sense. Never mind. I had not taken the hit point system into consideration. Yeah, no, it works. You're right. I was looking at this martial arts table in relation to Cyberpunk 2020, and yeah, that was my absolute mistake. Forgive me.
Whereas martial arts in 2020, you know, okay, so I have a skill of 6, that's a +6 to my damage. Got a body of 8, that's +3, so I'm already starting out at +9 to whatever dice roll I might make.
Oh, don't get me wrong, in Cyberpunk 2020, within our Lock Unlimited, I have the damage bonus from martial arts. You get half your skill, because otherwise it's a punch should not do more damage. Just unless, even at cybernetic levels, sure, if you've got like a body of 15 and you punch someone, their head might explode. But beyond that, if you're just a human being, yeah. I mean, even at half, you're still killing people, you know, with your blows.
Yep.
It's just not the overkill. I like the poison chart. It's so much clearer in what it does and how it works than it was in 2020. It's a different animal completely. I very much like the poison chart.
Yeah, and the falling damage, the exposure, fire. I'm glad they added those kind of rules.
Yeah, they needed to be there. I mean, you could find them in various source books and in some cases like secondary supplements in 2020. But yeah, it's nice to have rules for the environment.
Yep. And we got him to take cover hit points. Again, we've already talked about cover and what an annoying thing that is.
Yeah, there's no such thing as partial cover.
And then we got into armor, which we kind of talked about, and then the whole wounding system with light, serious, and mortal. To me, it works. For the
I mean,
system.
at least getting wounded still has some effect.
Yep.
It's not quite it's not as extensive, and I hesitate to use the word realistic, but it's not the 2020 method, but it works for Red. It works for what they're going for. Mm-hmm. It probably works really well for what they're going for. Critical injuries work well for what Red's going for.
Yep, and they still have death saves, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I think they did a lot better with the vehicle combat / rules within the basic book, because even in 2020 I don't think they had any rules. Unless I'm thinking differently. I thought it was like in Solo Fortune 1 that they introduced some rules.
Yeah, you had to get Solo of Fortune to get the vehicle rules, and then of course they expanded them in Solo of Fortune 2, and then again in Maximum Metal, and then again in Firestorm Stormfront.
Yep.
It was an evolving process. It's weird that they've got cars and bikes. I get that they're talking about supercars and super bikes, but like their listed speed of going 300 miles per hour is as standard. It's cool. Slightly terrifying, but cool.
Yeah.
The weirdest thing about vehicle combat is starting your car places you at the top of initiative.
Yeah. I don't understand that.
Yeah, just automatically it places you at the top of the initiative. It just came across as a weird rule. Like, I'm not sure how that would work in practice, but again, it's not something that's really going to have. I wouldn't imagine it's something that really gets brought up all that often.
Right. Which leads us into net running.
Just before we get into net running, I gotta say, I love the reputation chart. Like, that was a highlight of the book for me.
And that it classified if you have this rep, you're well known versus some street punk without any type of reputation. Yeah, and I also like that if you lost, you actually have a penalty towards actions.
Yeah.
So
just having something there in the main book that actually tries to explain what reputation is and how it affects your character is nice.
So now we get into net running. To me, net running was good. That it's easier to integrate the net runner into team combat. Also, it's easier to make kind of Datafortress / net architects.
Yeah, I agree. The net running rules are dramatically improved, like just on a whole nother level than they were in 2020. In 2020, it was pretty much almost universal that like GMs just disallowed net runners as a character role that could be taken because they were such a pain in the butt. Like fixes eventually came along, but at the start you were running a different game for the net runner than you were for everybody else. Red's net running rules are streamlined and beautiful, to be honest.
Yeah, there's some things that I don't like. Basically, because of their economy system.
I mean,
they've painted themselves into the corner with the DVs, right? So if I have a password and I want to put that password to like a legendary level, okay, how much does that cost? You can't, right? Because at password, I think DV of 14, 16, something like that.
It still feels like a separate game. It's just a much more streamlined game than it was.
But and again, they seem like they've kind of So building levels of 12 is super luxury, right? So that's at 10 grand. Okay, what if I want to do a DV of 14 or 16 or because I see right now net running is very easy, even for starting characters to go through,
which is a pleasant challenge.
It is,
but
there's also not a challenge.
Perfect. It's weird to me,
right? At higher levels,
it's weird to me that you still have the giant list of programs and stuff, like combat, weapons, armor, all got really simplified, but net running still has this basically its own like gear list, which is fairly large.
Well, I've always liked the net running rules, even from 2020. So again, this is kind of gear porn.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Again, gear porn is a beautiful thing. I'm not begrudging it. I'm not knocking it. It just when you look at how much they simplified everything else, it was weird that net running. I guess in the grand scheme of things, net running did get simplified. I mean, the list of programs from 2020 filled a thick source book. I mean, Brainware Blowout.
Yep. And they don't even have.
So I guess it still got simplified.
According to some people, techie is really, you want to work with a techie to create a program. And I'm like, what? No.
That doesn't make any sense.
That makes no sense.
Techies aren't programmers.
Yeah.
You want a cyber deck? Create a cyber deck. Yeah, you go to a techie.
Yeah.
But a net runner or a techie writing programs, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. The other thing I didn't like about the cyber decks was that a program and a cyber deck add-on are the same thing. It takes up one slot.
Yeah, you would think the add-ons would just would be treated separately.
Yeah, but they're not. But I do like, it definitely streamlined the system. It definitely and to me, looking at the net arc seemed like it harvers back to 2013 and how you laid out a data fort. With the basically a flow chart of how you get to where you need to go. Which is it's definitely, I played in the games with Netrunner, so it definitely speeds it up, but it still can take some time. And Netrunners can take away from gameplay, even in this system.
Yeah.
Not as much as they used to, but they still do.
No, not by any stretch, but yeah, they're, like I said, they're still playing a separate game. It's, you got your Netrunner over here doing things, and they've tried to ameliorate that with bringing the Netrunner along, because there's no more internet.
Yeah. So we're at the
so the Netrunner has to physically go to the locations. Yeah, we still have
Trauma Team,
healing and fluff and all that to talk about.
You want to save it for 2 weeks?
You know what? We are exactly at halfway through. Well, not
Your
exactly,
list.
but a little over halfway through my notes. So yeah, let's go ahead and put that on. Make that the next episode.
All right. So next episode we'll be talking a little more on Cyberpunk Red, and again, I think we're probably also not only going to talk about this, but also our recommendations on whether or not we give our stamp or not on Cyberpunk Red as a predecessor. So stay tuned for that episode.
Indeed.
Also like to thank.
Gotta thank.
Yeah, go ahead. You finish.
Yeah, Cyberpunk Uncensored
for hosting us. This video should get to YouTube in the next week or so. If the volumes aren't great, I'll adjust them in post-production. I'll try to listen to these tomorrow, and hopefully we came a lot better through a lot better than our last episode. So, all right, man. I will talk to you in 2 weeks. Did I lose you?
Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, my phone shut off for some reason. I apologize about that. Did any of that come through?
Which part? The thanking of Cyberpunk Uncensored was the last thing I think I heard you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Cyberpunk Uncensored, thanks for hosting us. Once again, it's great working with you. Everybody else, thanks for showing up and listening to us. And you guys stay safe out there.
Yep. We'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks. Later.